What's up, guys? Here are my predictions for UFC Fight Night happening in Brooklyn. It's actually going to be the first card in ESPN Plus on the whole ESPN franchise, so this is going to be pretty fun. It's going to be pretty interesting. This card is actually really good. There's a lot of good matchups, a lot of compelling matchups, some prospects to look out for, like Alexander Hernandez, especially Gregor Gillespie. We're going to see what Greg Hardy's all about against his first experienced MMA fighter. We have a super fight going on in the main event, and a lot of fighters on the undercard to present themselves to the new fans, especially. So it's a great opportunity for all the fighters on this card. And we're going to start with Alexander Hernandez versus Donald Cerrone. This is a pretty compelling fight, and it's another fight where they're putting up a prospect, a young, hungry fighter up against the veteran and Donald Cerrone, who holds all kind of records for his experience. But this is going to be at 155. Donald Cerrone has not fought at 155 for quite a while, actually. He's been fighting at 170 since 2016 when he fought Patrick Cote. And he's returning against a hungry, powerful, fast-starting fighter in Alexander Hernandez. Now, Hernandez is more of a wrestler than anything. If there's anywhere he's going to have a big advantage over Cerrone, it's going to be mostly in the wrestling, especially in the first round. Cerrone, especially at 155, was always known to have a very slow first round. And that's usually when fighters like RDA, like Anthony Pettis, like many other fighters in the past, were overwhelming Cowboy. And that is the round where Hernandez just fires all cylinders and tries to take out his opponent, like he did against Beneil Dariush. He tried it against Olivier Aubin-Mercier. He's done it many times in his career. And with the wrestling, very powerful, and he's good defensively from submissions, like you saw in his last fight with Olivier Aubin-Mercier, who is an excellent BJJ artist. But in this fight, his BJJ defense is going to be tested against a legit black belt in Cerrone. On the feet, it's going to get pretty interesting because Hernandez moves forward and he's very pressuring. But how he's going to get in on the distance of the taller and longer Cerrone, who utilizes a lot of kicks to keep opponents at range, especially the front kick. He's developed a side kick as well, which is a little bit of a more safe approach to keep opponents away, as well as create your own distance. And Cerrone has a lightning quick jab with that reach. The only problem is Cerrone doesn't move his head too much. He stands very straight, very tall. He will duck under overhands, which is the main punch Hernandez goes for. And especially because he's going to be shooting up, he's going to be throwing a lot of hands upward at the much taller Cerrone. Cerrone ducking under the punches is naturally going to be an advantage for him. And ducking can also help him defend takedowns. So that defense that he's been utilizing a lot at 170, of waiting for the shots, move back, and then duck, and maybe shooting for his own takedown or hold on to the clinch like he did against Mike Perry. There he's going to be in his own world. The knees are going to be there, the elbows are going to be there. Even if he gets taken to the ground, he is going to be pretty comfortable there. Even a guy like Mike Perry was able to take him to the ground, and you saw what Cerrone was able to do. Instantly reverse the position from side control, work for the triangle, eventually get the arm bar. Hernandez has a different kind of way to set up strikes, so he can switch, which is his main setup to throw his power shots. So he can find southpaw or orthodox, but he usually just throws that power hand, and usually comes over the top with it. His kicks are not going to be too much of a problem for Cerrone to handle at all, and Hernandez, when he switches, he's going to have to watch out for the head kicks if he is just looking for his entry to get in on Cerrone rather than setting him up behind a jab or something. Because Cerrone, he could throw right high kicks or switch kicks really quickly from any stance he takes. And his leg kick's going to be devastating. His push kick's going to be devastating. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go down Cerrone. I believe he is an underdog in this fight, which is a little bit crazy to me. I would think they would have learned from the Mike Perry fight, especially. Mike Perry's a lot more formidable and a lot bigger than Hernandez is, and Cerrone was able to be comfortable on the feet and be dominant on the ground. In this one, I think Cerrone's going to be even more dominant on the feet and be just as, if not a little bit less comfortable on the ground with Hernandez. But just a little bit less comfortable against Hernandez. Look what he did to Mike Perry. So I'm going to go with Cerrone. I'm going to go by a second round submission. And then we go to Paige VanZant versus Rachel Ostovich. Now this fight's going to be a little interesting, where both these fighters like to go is on the ground mostly. The grappling is where they prefer the fight, or at least where they're most effective. Now, Paige VanZant has been striking a lot more using her footwork, like you saw in the Beck Rawlings fight, for an example, and also when you saw against Jessica Rose Clark. On the feet, especially in these divisions, she's able to make a lot more errors, a lot more mistakes while staying at a distance because she has pretty good footwork. She is very elusive, right? So if she makes a mistake, she's able to get away usually quicker than her opponents. But when it goes to the ground, she does make mistakes there. She's very aggressive, as well as risks a lot of positions, like you saw against Michelle Waterson. And the best example is when she fought Rose Namajunas. And she was submitted in both of those fights, making big, risky moves. And on the ground, there isn't any room to make mistakes, especially for the female divisions. And for 125ers and 115ers, except for a few fighters, she's not going to get caught by these one-shot knockout blows if she makes a mistake on the feet. right? And she's usually moving away, leaning away when she's trying to get away from punches. So they're not going to catch her clean. And in this fight, she's facing a bigger fighter in Rachel Ostovich, who prefers the ground as well, and is a lot more methodical, a lot more sound when it comes to BJJ. Her armbar is nasty, and she's very willing to scramble in any position. I believe she has a much better ground game than Paige VanZant does, especially when it comes with the size. VanZant was a big 115 fighter, which allowed her to get away with some of the mistakes on the ground against fighters like Felice Herrig, but in this one, it's going to be a lot harder to do so without getting stuck. And on the feet, I don't think there's anything either of these two can do to hurt the other, really. I believe Ostovich is just as tough, if not tougher, than VanZant is. And again, she's a lot more basic, a lot more fundamentally sound in the striking, especially with her boxing. And she is much better defensively of getting away from strikes in the pocket. So even if it gets in close, if VanZant's able to get in close on Ostovich, Ostovich is going to have a lot more success in defending the shots, potentially countering VanZant whenever she gets in. So in this fight, I'm going to have to go with Rachel Ostovich. I think the size is going to play a factor in this one. I think just the overall fundamental skills are going to play in Ostovich's favor. So I'm going to go with Rachel Ostovich. I'm going to go by a third round submission. I think it's going to be a bit back and forth, especially on the feet. And I believe Ostovich is going to be able to get it to the ground late, as maybe her corner advises her to do so, and eventually gets a submission due to VanZant making a little bit of a mistake there. Then we go to Gregor Gillespie versus Yancy Medeiros. This is going to be an interesting fight, and it's most likely going to end with a finish. I mean, these two guys finish almost all of their fights, and they are both game as it gets. Gregor Gillespie, one of the best wrestlers in the entire division until he faces the top tier. We can't really say he is the best, but credentials and just looking at his MMA wrestling, he is so powerful there. He is so strong there. Nobody wants to really exchange with him in the wrestling, and it's a reason why it's hard to get him fights. His single legs especially are such a problem for his opponents. I would probably have to say Gregor Gillespie or Daniel Cormier has the best single leg in the game right now. And he loves to drive into the cage, very similar to Khabib Nurmagomedov. He has developed this game against the cage just because of his wrestling prowess. He pushes it up against the cage and creates a lot more opportunities for himself, like you saw his fight against Jason Gonzalez, landing elbows off the clinch so quickly against a striker in Gonzalez, and able to drop him just with that strike. Very explosive with his hands, like you saw against Holbrook where he landed the jab left hook. When do you see that in MMA? Very present in boxing, but his jab left hook combo was almost perfect. And this gives his opponents problems on the feet to where his takedowns work a lot more now. It worked regardless, but now it's almost too easy for him to take his opponents to the ground, and his ground and pound is absolutely ferocious. The only problem with Gregor Gillespie on the feet is he gets a little bit too open to strikes, right? He likes to be very textbook with his boxing, and that's really what he goes for the most. He doesn't kick a whole lot. Very textbook, but it's a little bit too textbook where there's no flavor in there. It's just strictly from the book. He stands a little bit too straight, his chin's a little bit too exposed. He just blocks with his hands. He doesn't use head movement almost at all, except when he goes for takedowns. And he was able to get caught a couple times in his career. And against Yancy Medeiros, who has pretty good boxing, dangerous hands, and can overwhelm you with volume, it's going to be a problem if he stays there. But then again, he's going to go to the wrestling. Of course, he has that. His striking isn't his background. It's just something to give his opponents some danger and something to worry about. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Gregor Gillespie. I think on the ground, he completely dominates. I think on the feet, he can hurt Yancy Medeiros. Medeiros doesn't have the greatest chin, but he has heart for days. Even though he can get hurt, it's hard to finish him. And I know Yancy Medeiros has a good ground game. He has some sneaky submissions, but I think Gillespie just way over that. I think he'll just dominate the whole ground game. So I'm going to go with Gregor Gillespie. I'm going to go by a second round TKO. And then we go to Greg Hardy versus Alan Crowder. Now I want to say this off the back. This is a very hard fight to predict because we haven't seen too much of Greg Hardy. I still haven't seen how he reacts to getting hit. He got hit a couple times in his Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. He got hit a couple times, especially in his first fight. He got hit by a 1-2, I believe, from a long, big fighter. And he took it pretty well. But against someone who is a little bit more experienced, who knows how to transition with takedowns and stuff like that, I don't know how he reacts at all to that. As well as I don't know how he reacts when the fight goes later in the rounds because he starts so quickly. It's such a hard fight to predict right off the bat. Now, the first thing we have to point out is Greg Hardy is extremely fast for a heavyweight. He's very fast with his hands, and more importantly, he's very fast with his feet. Especially when you saw in his first fight in the Contender Series, he was very quick to move in and out. Now, his technique and his punches were a little bit strange, but he was able to get in on someone who looked longer than him and move out very quickly to the point where he wasn't getting hit. The only time he was really getting hit in that fight was when he was getting engaged on and his punches were missing. But I believe in this fight, he is much bigger than Alan Crowder. He's much faster than Alan Crowder, and he's much more powerful. And we have seen Alan Crowder have a tough time with his takedowns when he was on the Contender Series. Takedowns aren't the best, and that is the best place he has to put this fight in. He has to get it to the ground, and he has to push the pace because he does have very good cardio for a heavyweight. He comes in a bit light at around 137 or so, where I believe Greg Hardy actually has to cut weight a little bit to get to 265. So this fight is a hard fight to predict. I mean, Alan Crowder doesn't move his head a whole lot, and if he doesn't go for takedowns, and especially if they don't work on Greg Hardy because of the technique is failing on him, especially due to the size of Greg Hardy and the explosiveness early, because we all know Hardy's probably going to come out fast early and try to finish this fight, Alan Crowder is going to be in a bit of trouble here. So it's a tough fight to call, but for fun, I'm going to go with Greg Hardy in this one. I would go with the more skilled and the more experienced fighter here in Alan Crowder, but something tells me he's going to make a mistake, and it's heavyweight, anybody can get caught, and especially for Greg Hardy, he needs to catch Alan Crowder once, and it's all over. Even in Hardy's first fight on the Contender Series, where he faded away and landed that right overhand counter on his opponent, that sequence in itself was beautiful. And if he could do something like that, because his footwork is creating those opportunities for himself, he's so fast to move away, he's able to get these angles on these heavyweights where these heavyweights aren't able to get on each other. If he can land something like that on Crowder, he should end this fight. So I'm going to go with Greg Hardy, and I'm going to go by a first round knockout. And then we go to the main event, and by far the best and biggest fight in the entire card, Henry Cejudo versus TJ Dillashaw, the super fight for the flyweight title. TJ Dillashaw is going to go down to 125, which is an X factor in this fight because we don't know how he's going to feel. We don't even know if he's going to make weight. So I'm going to take into account the TJ we always see at 135 versus the Henry Cejudo we always see at 125. So Henry Cejudo, probably the best wrestler in the UFC, probably the best wrestler in MMA credentially. He has a very good double leg takedown. He has a very good inside trip, like he used many times against Demetrius Johnson. And he has developed this karate stance on his feet where he's looking for his right hand, and he's very good at moving in and out. He doesn't move so much laterally, though, and that's going to be a huge liability against a guy like TJ Dillashaw, who moves in every direction while switching at every kind of tempo. That is a hard guy to fight for a karate fighter, just naturally. Henry Cejudo likes to move in and out. He wants to measure for the right hand and potentially land that right straight on TJ, but when TJ's never on the center line, that in itself is going to put TJ in a huge advantage. And TJ likes to follow up his angles with head kicks, which can intercept his opponent. I don't know who's going to have the speed advantage in this one. Cejudo is used to fighting faster fighters. TJ, I believe, might be the bigger fighter in there, but by fight night, I believe they might be around the same weight. If not, TJ might be a little bit more. But TJ's going to have a reach advantage. He's going to be taller, which is not something he's used to at 135. His takedown defense is absolutely insane. I think Cejudo might get a takedown or two on TJ, but I don't think he's going to keep him on the ground because the thing about Cejudo is, yes, he's an excellent wrestler. He's very good with takedowns. He doesn't do anything on the ground, really. And TJ has submissions. He has trained at Team Alpha Male for a very long time. I believe he's a much better grappler than Cejudo is. TJ, in his own right, is a very good MMA wrestler. It's going to be very hard for Henry Cejudo to take him down, especially at the distance that TJ works, with the angles, with the footwork, and with switching especially. Who switches better than TJ in combat sports in general? Very few fighters. And that is going to throw off some of the takedowns of Cejudo naturally. And Cejudo is open to leg kicks like we saw against Demetrius Johnson when he takes that karate stance. When you take that karate stance, you leave your leg exposed completely because of the width of your stance. But TJ really has to work switching to the outside and potentially landing a left high kick or left body kick. Can also throw a jab, switch to get the outside foot advantage, which on a karate fighter is one of the best places you want to be, and look for the left straight, if not the left overhand, the left hook, or even the left uppercut, and end it with the right hook fading away. Stuff like that TJ can absolutely do. So my prediction for this fight, I do think TJ should win this fight. I don't know about the weight and all that. That is something nobody knows until it happens. But I'm going to go with TJ Dillashaw on this one. I'm going to go by a third round TKO. I think he probably will land a left high kick on Cejudo, dropping Cejudo, and then he finishes it due to ground and pound. So yeah, then we'll go to the betting odds to see if there's anything interesting. Bilal Muhammad is an underdog. That's a bit interesting. T. Edwards is actually a favorite over Dennis Bermudez. That's interesting. Edwards is young. Bermudez has taken a lot of damage, but Edwards does make a bunch of mistakes that a veteran like Bermudez can take advantage of. Mario Batista is a 4-1 underdog. I mean, I don't know if the odds makers ever learned from that mistake. When two fighters who are very new to the UFC face each other, I don't know why they always put one fighter as a huge favorite. I do think Sandhagen should win the fight, but this is not out of the possibility of Batista upsetting him. Don Cerrone is an underdog. I do think he will win the fight. It could be a little bit dicey, especially early in the fight. If Hernandez is going to win, it's either going to be, I think, by a decision or first round finish. Other than that, I think Cerrone could finish the fight anywhere else. Ostovic is an underdog. That's interesting as well. VanZant does have a name, so maybe that. And Ostovic is 4-4 in her career. Should be a pretty close fight, but I do think Ostovic should win. Ellen Crowder is a 4-1 underdog against Greg Hardy. Again, you cannot make this mistake. It's not that one-sided at all. Greg Hardy almost has no experience. If I'm going to be honest, I don't know who's going to win, which should tell you that this fight is up in the air. I'm picking Greg Hardy. I don't know actually if he's going to win the fight. I'm not super confident at all in him winning the fight because I should be going with a guy like Crowder. And then Henry Cejudo is an underdog against TJ Dillashaw. Those are some logical betting odds right there. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. Leave a comment below who you guys think are going to win the fights and why. And which fight on the card, I mean, obviously the main event, but besides the main event, which fight are you most looking forward to? Is it the Greg Hardy thing because of his name and him coming into the UFC and being on the big stage here as the co-main event? Is it Gregor Gillespie versus Yancy Medeiros because of the prospect in Gillespie is so promising? Is it the Paige VanZant versus Ostovic fight for obvious reasons? Is it Cerrone versus Hernandez? I think it's one of the best fights in the entire card. Dennis Bermudez versus T. Edwards should be a very good fight as well. Bilal Muhammad versus Jeff Neal should be a pretty good fight too. So there's a lot of good fights on this card from bottom to top. My next video is going to be the podcast. It's going to come out most likely by Thursday or Friday. So be lookout for that. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.